Russia says its recruitment is hitting all-time highs. But if that were true, why are we seeing some of these actions taking place behind the scenes? Just what's really going on with Russia's personnel crisis? And is it Russia that's going to run out of troops first? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. If you wear body armor, you already know not all plates are created equal. Today's sponsor, RMA Armament, isn't some Chinese drop shipper. It's not a rebrand of some manufactured overseas armor. It's American-made armor, made by people who know what it means to put your life behind it. The founder is a Marine Corps vet and former law enforcement officer who named the company after his kids because, as we know, the whole point of body armor is to get you home safe to your family. They've been making armor for over a decade now in a 30,000 square foot facility in Iowa using American-made materials and 100% American labor. I actually picked up their XRT plate in the Sappy cut. You notice this is thinner than anything I was issued by the U.S. military in Afghanistan and significantly lighter. But the best part is that this, despite being so much lighter, is rated against almost every mid-size cartridge, almost every full-size standard issue rifle round, and even some armor-piercing rounds. It's made of ceramic, so you're not going to have to worry about spall, and it's available in shooter's cut and Sappy. RMA has body armor from level 3 soft armor all the way up to level 4 rated plates. Bottom line, RMA is doing it right. An American company, American-made, built by people who understand what it means to put your life behind your body armor. So hit the link in the description, check out the catalog and videos. They've got some sales, and see why RMA is called the King of Armor. Okay, so if you're looking for a red flag that recruitment's not going great, well, here it is. Russia has been forced to call up all of its reservists in occupied Luhansk Oblast, which Russia considers, well, for a while it was considered the Luhansk People's Republic, and then it was sort of integrated into Russia via their constitution that says, you know, that it's actually a part of Russia, but also it's got a separate legal system than Russia. It's all very strange. But in the early hours of November 15th, Russian forces, occupation forces, forcibly mobilized a group of reservists. Now, I want to remind you guys that in Russia, almost every able-bodied male is in the reserves, or those who've completed their mandatory military service are part of the Russian reserve. And so this is more like a draft. It's draft adjacent, we'll say. Now, these draftees, really, from Luhansk, were told they were going to guard infrastructure facilities, but they were immediately transferred to location for military bases for training instead. This is a red alert. Usually, again, guarding infrastructure is a pretty desirable gig and increasingly in demand as Ukrainian drones target energy and military infrastructure in the occupied regions, as well as Russia itself. But for a long time, we've seen this, right? Occupied, the separatist regions have trained up their people to actually fight the legitimate Ukrainian government. That's nothing new. But the Russian Ministry of Defense had promised these guys that they were just going to be guarding infrastructure, but in fact, these guys ended up on military bases training for what sounds like assault operations. So that's not generally an action you're going to take unless you are pretty hard up for people. Bear in mind, again, Russia's official stance is that it's actually never recruited more troops. Now, where things get more complicated is I want to call back to two other stories, sort of draw the through line for you here. The first is from about 3 weeks ago, where Russian regions were cutting significant bonuses. And it may seem like you say, well, if you're paying fewer bonuses, they must be getting all the troops they need. But the truth is that it's sort of the opposite, that the huge paydays have essentially everyone that could be bought has been bought. And now they're finding that even as they've been raising rates, it's not attracting more people. So the Russians said, well, why pay more when we can get the same thing for less, right? And as they point out, essentially there's all of these defense ministry campaigns talking about be a man, go die in Ukraine. But they also say a contract is where financial stability begins. And one example given by an anti-draft organization says, we've had cases where someone's mother fell ill, spent 6 months dying, and spent all their money on treatment and then on the funeral. Afterward, they have no savings, no money, nothing at all. And then a recruitment ad is shoved in their mailbox. So right now, it's not like Russians, they simply need to maintain a large enough payday that it's the easiest, fastest money a Russian's going to get. But they're just simply sitting around waiting for Russians to become totally, really able-bodied Russian men to become totally desperate, right? Again, paying for mom's cancer treatment, making child support payments, being, evicted from a home, losing the family farm, so to speak. The Russian recruitment machine simply waits around for those people. And that the real recruitment is actually coming through coercion of conscripts, right? Conscripts serving their mandatory 1 year of military service are actually barred from being sent into combat technically, but commanders and recruiters have coerced, some say dragooned conscripts into signing contracts after just a few months of basic training. Conscription is now the main feeding trough for these contractual military service. Now, we know that's not necessarily true because we don't see in the Ukrainian drone footage, it's almost unheard of to see 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. There's almost none, and almost none are captured. We see men in their 40s, 50s, and sometimes it appears men in their 60s who are the actual combatants in this war. So that implies that at least perhaps these contract soldiers either end up in more rear echelons, or there's just not that many of them. That's not a reliable source either. So I think this is a really interesting dynamic. But the thing is, not all regions are cutting these bonuses. So it seems like maybe in some regions, either the bonuses are sufficient to meet their numbers, or they're just, as we said, not really necessary because recruitment's down kind of everywhere. And in some regions, maybe high bonuses don't really attract who they think they are. We can see this from, again, an article from just about a month ago, saying that a lot of these advertisements that are being leaked by the Russian state are saying, hey, listen, make sure you sign up. Make sure you sign up so that you can get your big payday. Recruiters in several Siberian regions told a reporter that most of the new applicants are of extremely advanced age or have chronic illnesses, right? In northern Irkutsk, where officials reportedly stated recruitment has been stalled for months. Most inquiries focused on financial benefits like debt forgiveness, loan deferments, and educational privileges for soldiers' children. Sources told the outlet that the defense ministry is, of course, using misleading advertisements to get recruits, claiming a peace deal could be near, and you better sign up now, because if the peace deal happens, you're going to want to make sure the bonuses won't be here forever. Classic advertising. False sense of urgency, right? But most Russians motivated by money at the available pay levels have already joined the military. Now, it really is just like, you have to remember that the Russian and Ukrainian calculus are very different, despite having somewhat comparable losses. First off, Ukraine, which has a smaller population, now made even smaller by the fact that their recruitment drives, a lot of Ukrainians fled the country. You can see Russian forces take more casualties. They do a lot more offensive actions, and they are they're taking many more casualties. Ukraine is defending its homeland from an invader, a known threat, and a country that in Ukrainian history has actually perpetrated a genocide against the Ukrainian people. So for Ukraine, the motivation is high. The government is in full mobilization. In contrast, Russia, this is a war of choice. Putin has worked tirelessly to avoid a true draft, or the pseudo draft, the mobilization of reservists, not unlike what's happening in Luhansk Oblast. So this sense that the Russians have, where, politically, they just can't put up the same level of commitment that the Ukrainians do. And that is the quintessential advantage of a small power fighting a larger power. That small power has to be willing to take steps and do things that are impossible. And what I want to point out is that you have these Russian analysts, they do a lot of math on and say, we're going to mathematically, we're going to attrit the Ukrainian forces in a matter of days or hours or months. But you have to remember that the U.S. said the exact same thing about North Vietnam. Every month was the breaking point for the North Vietnamese. They would totally run out of people. They would totally run out of logistics. But the truth is, it never happened. The North Vietnamese just became more and more efficient over time. They became more and more capable. They became harder and harder to detect and harder to destroy. And the U.S. simply ramped up its firepower further and further and further. And so the U.S. spent more money, more material, while the North Vietnamese spent less and less and less. And that's what we're seeing here. The Ukrainian drone tech becomes not just better, it becomes more efficient, right? We're seeing the Ukrainians work just as hard to make their air interceptors or their attack drones cheaper, work just as hard to make them cheap as they are to make them effective. And when you're fighting an enemy like that, who becomes leaner and meaner in equal measure, it's hard for someone like Russia to focus on attriting them more and more. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thank you so much. Thanks to today's sponsor, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.